Hello and welcome to another episode of the Heat Check. I'm John Devine. This is Anthony Chang. We're gonna get right into it. Can tell you, Anthony, I've been sick all week and I was coming out of it, and then I
Hmm.
watched last night's game. I don't think I feel well again.
Yeah,
What
it
was
was
that all about?
yeah, it was not pretty. I mean, honestly, like it's not that surprising. I know Heat fans don't want to say that, hear that, but I think entering the season, we're all hoping for something different than last year, even though most of the team returned. But this quote unquote new offense and different things like that, they're having the same issues. There are some differences, but they're having the same issues, struggling to break 100 points, right, in today's NBA, which is very rare. They score 107 points. Have most of their guys healthy. They still score 107 points. Have a scoring drought in the third quarter, which scoring droughts have been an issue for this team now for the last few years. Um, Losing at home to quality teams. This season they've lost to the Magic and the Knicks at home, but they've beaten the Hornets and the Pistons, kind of same as last year where they fatten up on wins against bad teams and they lose against good teams. So it's a lot of the same issues. Last night was, I mean, it was the third quarter. They were up by 13 with 8 minutes left in the third quarter. The Knicks end the quarter on a 30-10 run, and from there the Knicks led the rest of the game. So yeah, disappointing because it looked like the Heat were on their way to a good win, right? A good early season win, up 13 in the third quarter, but they couldn't hold on. Their offense again went cold, and here we are, 2-2. Kind of, I think. I know Heat fans again are disappointed, but I kind of think this is kind of what we expected, right? When you see the schedule, who they played the first four games. But again, I think Heat fans were expecting or hoping for something different. Maybe they escape with a win over Orlando or New York, and they're 3-1 at this point, but they did not, and they're 2-2.
Well, I'm gonna say this. Early in the season, you're gonna, like you said, you're gonna sneak one here, you're gonna blow one there. I think what may be part of the reason people are frustrated is there's none of that. It's not a none of it is a surprise. Like you said,
No,
it's an extension of what we had last year. This halftime, but the thing that bothered me is Carl Anthony Towns was not
yeah,
going off for much going into this game, and Knicks fans were a little bit nervous and concerned about them. Well, he got right. He went off. Um, and the other thing is, we always talk about Bam and what a great defender he is, which he is. When he plays these big guys, I rarely feel like he's not big enough to cover them. He's a guy who can cover 1 through 5. And, unless it's that 7'9" kid from University of Florida who's a freshman, I feel like he's big enough to cover whoever. Yesterday was one of the few times I felt like they don't have anybody big enough to cover this guy.
yeah. I mean, there's only a few guys who can do that to Bam, like you said. The first one that comes to mind is Nikola Jokic, who Bam makes it tough on him, right? But there's only so much you can do against that guy. He is just a big body, extremely skilled, maybe the most skilled player in the NBA. Can score from anywhere on the court. We double him, he's gonna make the right pass. And then Karl Anthony Towns, he's done this to the Heat a few times now. Karl Anthony Towns had success against the Heat. He's another big man who's very, very skilled. He can score a three-level scorer, and you saw that last night. I mean, he again, I don't see many players, whether it's a big man or a guard or a wing, do that to Bam. And Karl Anthony Towns was really, really impressive. And you could tell the Knicks made an effort, like you said. Karl Anthony Towns had a slow start to the year, and even Spoelstra said, I asked Spo after the game about, they kind of held Brunson in check for the first half, and he had 4 points. The cat was dominant. What happened? He said, I don't think we held Brunson in check. I think you read, what Brunson was saying before the game. He wanted to make an effort to get Cat involved and get him going, and I think we saw that. They ran the offense through him, and it worked. And again, Bam, it was a bad showing for Bam. There's no way around it. Not great on the offensive end. He had 7 shots, right, which we'll get to later in the episode. And then defensively, again, we don't say this often, but Karl Anthony Towns had a lot of success against them. So yeah, there aren't many guys who can do that to him. But again, that's what happens. The Knicks got better this offseason. I know they're still working through things, but you could tell like last year, Jalen Brunson basically needed to play like an MVP for the Knicks to win games, right? If he was off, they weren't winning many games, especially on the road. And Brunson didn't have a bad game, but he had 22 points and 18 shots. Not great, not MVP level, that's for sure. But they still won on the road by 9 points because they have another guy who scored 44. So the Knicks are deeper, they're better, and we saw that last night.
And that's the thing. So, we're talking about the Knicks. The Knicks have different players they're moving in unfamiliar spots. With the exception of the fact that they didn't really have Terry Rozier integrated as much because he was injured, these are guys who played with each other. These are guys who have played. These are guys who have maybe not in every combination, but they have played with each other. So, in theory, that learning curve should be a little bit faster. And yet it looks like the Knicks were the ones who go, okay, we can't get we weren't able to get Cat going early, so we're going to feed this guy. We're just going to force feed him, and then we're going to see what we do off of it. Meanwhile, you said Bam took 7 shots. How many did Jimmy take too?
9 shots, 16 shots between the two of them.
Now,
that's just
that
not
being
enough
said,
for the two best players.
let's be honest. Tyler Hero went off last night.
Yeah,
that's about as good as Tyler Hero's looked.
Right.
But you said it. Hey, Tyler Hero went off. Cat went off. Okay. Jalen Brunson, 22 points and 18 shots. Not the most efficient thing, but 22 points. And the Heat had who to come up for the second guy?
Yeah, I mean, the second or third guy, the players with the second or third most shots on the team against the Knicks were Terry Rozier, who was 5 of 14, and Jaime Hawkins, who was 2 of 10. And then you get to Jimmy Butler, who was 6 of 9, efficient, but 9 shots is only so much you could do, right?
Right.
And Bam, 3 of 7. Bam, I mean, Jimmy has had his moments early on in the season. He had a really good game against Charlotte. He had a good game against Detroit, 2 Heat wins. But against quality opponents that have big bodies, which we got to last episode, John, like he struggles to find that mismatch, right? And I think we saw that last night where they have OG, they have Mikal Bridges, they have different guys they could throw on him length. And Jimmy, 15 points and 9 shots, that's just not good enough for your best player. I think there is a filling out process right now, which is crazy to say, like you said, because these guys have played together for most of them for like 4 or 5 years now. But I think with Terry Rozier in the lineup, there are 4 guys out there in the starting group that are probably better with the ball in their hands, right? Who are shot creators. And there aren't as many complementary pieces. Not saying that the group can't work, but there aren't as many like the Duncan Robinson, the Haywood Highsmith, who kind of know their role, don't need the ball, can make a cut on the baseline, can just space out. There are 4 guys in that group that need the ball, and I think you're seeing Jimmy and Bam kind of it's affecting them a little bit, right? The offense right now is pretty much going through Terry and Tyler when that starting group is on the court, and Tyler's played really well, but Terry has been inefficient. And you want to see some of those shots from Terry probably, and even some from Tyler. 20 shots is a lot, even though he played really well last night. He's probably not going to take 20 shots every game. You want to see more of those shots going to Jimmy, who's your most efficient player. I don't think anybody would argue that. He's your most efficient offensive player. He should be having the highest usage rate on the team. He should probably be getting the most, at least touches on the team, because he didn't be getting a lot of free throws, right? So the field goal attempts is not always going to reflect how many touches he gets. But he should be the guy you're running your offense through. And for whatever reason, in this starting group, because there are so many guys out there who are good with the ball in their hands, Jimmy's left kind of in the corner. He doesn't have the ball as much. And that's really not a formula for success. And I think the Heat know that, but it's just kind of working through the kinks right now with that starting group. Because again, even though these guys have played together, they haven't really played much with Terry. And that's really the change right now.
It's just, I know what fans are probably thinking because, look, last episode, the number of comments, and do they need an alpha on offense? And when I say that, it may not be this current group.
Yeah.
I think, there are guys who are the number 1 player on the team, and they are all inclusive. And it's okay, I'm going to get mine within the flow of the offense. And that's great. And it even goes back to, and it sounds sad, but the Michael Jordan versus LeBron James debate, where everyone's like, oh, I like this guy. And he's like, oh, he takes too many shots. And you need someone who gets everybody involved, like LeBron does or did for 20 years. And sometimes you need somebody who's going to grab it and say, get on my cape and follow me because I'm going to fly you out there.
I think that's what fans want to see, right? And I've seen some of the comments, I've seen some of, people are saying, and they're like, if you're a star player, this is how the NBA works. You demand the ball. You go get the ball, right? You don't wait for it to come to you. And fans want that from Jimmy, but Jimmy's really never been like that. He's never been that player. And Jimmy and Bam are 2 elite 2-way players, which is a great thing to have in today's NBA. But they tilt more to the defensive end. I think we could both say that, right? Well, and that's one of the reasons the offense has never been elite. And I think there was an interesting comment from Tyler last night after the game. We're asking about the offense and getting Bam and Jimmy more involved, and he's like, "Look, I think people are. This is cool. I think a lot of people are getting caught up in the offensive rating number and this and that. When as long as we win, that's all that matters. If it's 98, 97, as long as we win, that's it. I think the offense has been what it's been for 5 or 6 years now, and we've still won games. We're just continuing to work through it."
I think even Spo said last night, like one of the quotes, in effect, it said, "Hey, we have more options than we've had."
Yeah. Is that a good thing though? When they're all playing together, right?
When
like
you
I
have
don't
too
know.
many, then
Yeah.
I think the bad news is whichever one you pick, if it doesn't work, then you had 3 or 4 others.
Right.
The good news is when it's like this guy's getting it, everybody knows he's getting it, and he still comes through. So what? I mean, you're still getting the desired result.
Right. And I think, and what to Tyler's point when he says, I think the offense has been what it's been for 5 or 6 years now. That's the offense hasn't been good, right? They haven't had a top 10 offense since 2019, 2020 season. Last 2 years they've been a bottom 10 offense. I think fans just thinking that maybe this new offense would translate now to a top 10 offense. It's not. It's early. I don't want to completely rule it out, but I think we're seeing like it is what it is with this group. Their identity has to be on the defensive end. They have to have a top 10, ideally a top 5 defense to really be a contender because they're not going to have an elite offense. That's just not the personnel they have. They could change the offense. They can do 5 out. They can try to shoot less mid-range shots. They are who they are. They still play at a slow pace. They still don't have that bona fide elite scorer on the team. As good as Tyler Hero is, he's very good. And I think he's had a great start to the season. Probably been the best player. He's best player so far this season, actually. But they just don't have that, guy who's going to score 35 a night, 30 a night. So, yeah, I think they're trying for the offense to improve, and they should try for that. They should try new things. But I think through the first week, we're kind of seeing, look, the identity is still defense. They have to hang their hat on the defensive end because that's how they're going to win most games. They're not a team that's going to score 120 every single night. I actually think right now they have, at least up until the Knicks game, it probably didn't change because they didn't put up a lot of points against the Knicks. They were scoring the fewest points per game in the league. Some of that slowest pace, but because they played at a slow pace, but that just shows you like that's the game they play. They're gonna win games 102 to 99, 105 to 102. They're not gonna win games 125 to 122. So yeah, I think they're still trying to find their identity. They're still trying to figure out what this offense can be. But so far, it just seems like they're gonna have to go back to what's worked for them in the past, which is being the more physical team and just dragging the game into the mud and winning that way.
You're saying this, and all I'm thinking of is the first game of the season. And because of that first game of the season, Orlando's kind of piqued my interest. And I say that because Paolo Banchero went off for like 50 the other day, too.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that team, and I'm looking at this team, and I'm looking at the similarities between these teams. I'm looking at a bunch of guys 200, 250 miles to the north who don't exactly shoot that great.
Yeah.
Play a lot of defense, hustle around. But the difference is they've got a guy who's going for 50.
Yeah.
And everybody in there knows if someone's going for 50, it's going to be that guy. Now, someone else may show up. Jalen Suggs all of a sudden can shoot a little bit, as opposed to never let him shoot the ball. You have guys who can shoot somewhat.
Yeah, KCP is a good addition for them.
Right. And you run around and you go, okay, someone can emerge on the course of a night, but I know I've got this guy. At this point, and I know that Bam can initiate offense, but he's usually more of a facilitator. And I know playoff Jimmy exists, but playoff Jimmy and regular season Jimmy are not the same person. And there's a lot of tread on those tires too. It's not realistic to say, hey, summon this up for the next 75, 80 games.
Yeah.
In the playoffs. That's not his makeup. And yes, Tyler can, but Tyler is not the two-way player those two guys are.
Right.
It just is what it is.
But it just seems like
get more shots.
Yeah, it just seems like there's so many. There's so many holes to fill. Like it's like okay, you put these two guys in the court, but they're not good on defense. So how are you gonna make up for that? Oh, but you put these two guys in the court. They're good on defense, but they can't score. So what are you gonna like? So there's not as good as Jimmy and Bam are as two-way players. Who are the other two-way players on this roster, right? Like I don't know. So I think and this is a problem they've had now for the last few years of you're mixing and matching, trying to compensate for other guys in the court that the lineups just aren't balanced enough, right? And when Jimmy is great, we've seen it. When Jimmy is great, this team can beat good teams. I mean, it's kind of like you're saying the Orlando Magic recipe. That's been the Heat formula for success in the playoffs, where they have a guy who scores, 38 points on 65% shooting and turns into Michael Jordan in the playoffs, and they play really good defense and they win games. But to ask for Jimmy to do that over a regular season, that's not. I mean, it's not even sustainable over the playoffs, right? We saw that 2 years ago where he was great in the first two rounds, but then after that, he wasn't as good. Um, and they kind of need Jimmy to be that, to be at their peak. And again, it's like you said, he can't do that in the regular season. That's asking too much of really any player in the NBA, especially a 35-year-old. So I don't know. I think Eric Spoelstra will still try to obviously work through things. I think there are going to be changes in the rotation, probably from game to game. We've seen it already in the bench rotation. Last night, Drew Smith played. Haywood Highsmith and Alec Burks did not. The starting lineup has not been good. I'm trying to get the numbers here. It's only 4 games. It's early, small sample, but they've been outscored by 25.6 points per 100 possessions in 58 minutes together. That's the worst among any lineup in the league that's played at least 50 minutes. Not good. Will they make a change already? Probably not. I know Eric Spoelstra is one to want to wait a little bit, even if it's like 10 games, just to get a larger sample to make sure, it would be the right decision to make a move. But would I rule out a change at some point in the next couple weeks if this continues? No, definitely not. I mean, if they're getting dominated by teams, they're going to have to think about making a change. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to work through. I think we entered the year thinking, okay, this is our lineup. Everyone kind of knows their role. I'm not so sure anymore. I think we're seeing that they're going to have to try different combinations to see what brings the best out of us. What brings out the best out of their two best players, Bam and Jimmy. How can they get those two guys to their comfort zones, to their games, make sure they're aggressive and comfortable? Because they really haven't seemed aggressive and comfortable so far.
Okay, 2 points I want to make. One name you brought up, which is probably the key to all this, and I'm going to say it this way. Spoelstra. We know we have one of the best coaches in the league. Easily. Are we putting so much faith in Spo's expertise on X's and O's that we're looking and going, these pieces don't fit? I don't care who's coaching. Red Auerbach can rise up from the grave, or Pat Riley can come down for himself, and it's still tough to make these pieces fit. The second thing is, if this gets out of hand, do we throw guys like Ware in there to see what it looks like, where Bam doesn't have to do that? Let Ware take his lumps. And I know our DNA down here is not for growth as much as we need to win today, we need to win tomorrow. But in long term, if you can lighten up some of Bam's load, even if it's defensively covering, because full well Bam can go and switch off and go wherever.
Yeah.
If you have a second guy, and this guy happens to be 7 feet, he can do that. Love Thomas Bryant. What you see from Thomas Bryant is what you're going to get from Thomas Bryant.
Yeah.
We have a lottery ticket. We don't know what we have yet from him. Do we see what we have and see if that opens up a little bit? I mean, to another extent, Pell Larson, but you have a lot of guys in that tweener mode.
Yeah.
You can go through. But size we don't have. And if we don't have it, do we see what we get? Does he play around with it? And how much extra pressure is that on Spo? Because the GM or whoever the president is, maybe like, these pieces don't fit. Let me start. And I know Pat is good. Pat Riley is good for saying, you know what, this isn't working, and he can pull the trigger at any moment. I get it. But just keeping an eye open.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Spoelstra is obviously one of the best coaches in the NBA, if not the best. And I think you're seeing him try to make it work, right? He's trying new things. He's like, look, I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying. 5-out offense, fewer mid-range shots. You have Terry Rozier and Nico in the starting lineup. I think he's trying. Again, but the results so far have not really been much different than last year. And to your point about Khalil Ware, I know fans, again, it's like the backup quarterback phenomenon in the NFL. They want a first-round pick to play. Shiny new toy. He has size, which the Heat don't have much of. He has a really intriguing skill set as a shot blocker, a guy who could score around the rim, has the potential to make threes. There's a lot to like there. And I do think if things get out of hands, I think everything's on the table. I think you could see Khalil Ware playing with Bam. I think you could see Khalil Ware getting minutes as a backup big. Kevin Love hasn't played yet this year because of personal reasons. When he's back, he's probably going to be the backup center over Thomas Bryant. But yeah, I think if this, if they start this tough schedule they have coming up, if they're like 4-6 or 5-8 or something like that in a couple weeks, yeah, I think you could see Khalil Ware because one thing we know about Eric Spoelstra is he'll try anything. I mean, we've seen like Dexter Pittman start a playoff game during the Big Three era, right? Like he'll try anything to see if it works, and if it doesn't work, he'll go away from it. So I would not rule that out. But I'm not surprised that Khalil and Pella haven't played yet because again, you look at the guys who are playing. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? It kind of makes sense, and that's that like Haywood and Alec Burks aren't even getting consistent minutes, even with Pella and Khalil out of the rotation. But yeah, if things go south, I think you will probably see Spo try different things, and that might include Pella and Khalil.
Yeah, I can't see fans not clamoring for it at some point.
Yeah, I get it.
Now, here's the other thing. We're playing results here a little bit. We're playing off the results, but also how they look. Let's look at that upcoming schedule. The schedule is going to make this look even better or worse. They're going to Mexico City for a couple games.
One game against Washington.
One game? Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? I got that confused with the Panthers, who are in Finland for 2 games. Apparently, everybody likes our teams. That's great. But they're going to be in Mexico City. But yeah, they're going to go on the road a little bit. And for some teams, going on the road brings them tighter, brings them closer together, a little bit more practice time. But it can, this could spin one way or the other really, really fast.
Yeah, I always said before the season, like we're gonna know who the Heat are at Thanksgiving, I think, just because of their schedule. And you were hoping that probably they will start a little faster, or at least like 3-1 or something, in these first 4, because things get very tough very fast. That Washington game, it's Washington. They have looked better. They just swept Atlanta on a 2-game set. And it's in Mexico City. Like it's a different environment. It's a long flight. It's a neutral site game. Who knows what happens? But then you come home, you face Sacramento. Sacramento's a good team. And then you go on the road for 2 weeks. 6-game trip. 5 of the 6 games are against opponents who made the playoffs last season. At Phoenix, at Denver, at Minnesota. You have at Detroit. That should be a win, but who knows? It's the middle of a long trip. And then 2 games at Indiana, who just beat the Celtics last night in overtime. So yeah, I mean, you're 2-2 right now. After that stretch, that's 12 games into the season. Could they be 5-7? Could they be 4-8? If they keep playing like this and they lose against good teams, then yeah, they could. And at that point, yes, again, it's still technically early, but that's not exactly the start this team was looking for after making the play in the last 2 years, right? You're going to be trying to dig yourself out of a hole all season again. So this upcoming stretch is really going to be tough. It's going to be telling. And it's probably not the time to be working through stuff because you're facing good teams and in tough arenas. But then we're going to find out a lot about this team after the stretch, and who knows? I mean, again, this organization likes to be patient. They always say, give us 20 games. We'd like to see the first 20 games before they make any drastic moves or changes or anything like that. But if they get to that 12-game mark after that tough road trip and they're, God forbid, 3-9 or something like that. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how things go for the next few weeks.
And these are winning teams with style of play that really are not good matchups on top of it. Let's just not even forget that. They don't play. These aren't. These are taller teams that get out and run and get out and move. We already talked about Jokic. That's just the behemoth that's just going to be sitting there waiting for him. It's going to be a problem. Maybe it forces them to push a little harder and work through things, and maybe it accelerates what they're trying to achieve.
It could be a good thing. And they'll say the right things, right? They'll say the right things of like, we love being on the road. It's a way to bond and get closer and grow our game, and we always come back from that better. But it could be a bad thing. Again, like almost every team in the NBA has a worse road record than a home record, right? For a reason. It's tough to play on the road. So yeah, I've had this stretch circled since the schedule came out, and at 2-2, again, not a terrible start. They're 2-2, kind of again, I think what most people expected at this point. But I think you're hoping to build a little bit of cushion before entering this stretch. And look, if they lose to Washington, they're 2-3 entering this difficult stretch where they have 6 out of 7 games against playoff teams. That, yeah, that's not going to be good.
Well, the good news is we don't want to sit here and do this every week. It's pretty much cut and paste and say the same things over and over. So that's the only good news out of this. The bad news is we don't know what we're going to get right now. All I know is I don't know what this team's going to give us right now. But I do know we're going to be there for each step of it. Yep. So I would say make sure to follow Anthony. Make sure to follow the Miami Herald. We'll be there giving it to you each and every day that we can. And if you have questions, I know Anthony has mailbags, and like and subscribe here, and we'll try and get you all the questions answered that we can.
Yeah, maybe we can answer questions on next week's episode. We'll take questions on Twitter, and you can email me at hang@miamiherald.com, and we'll answer a few questions from listeners.
Okay.
Just to change things up a little bit.
Yes. And no, your question can't be if you can replace us, because the answer to that is no. So sorry about that.
We won't take those questions. We won't use those. Don't worry.
Okay.
We'll throw those out. Yeah.
Good. My self-esteem may be shot. No. But yes, we will be here, and we will do this next week. Good luck to them, back and forth. We know it's going to be a bumpy road, but we'll be here, and hopefully they get this figured out.
Bye, everybody.
All right. See you later.